quick about me. I graduated from Center High School in 2005. Went to Rice in Houston. Graduated in 2009. Got a bachelor double major in management and government. And when I was a junior, it was roughly 2008, I decided I wanted to go to the Marine Corps, fight some terrorists because it was still pretty bad over there. And then I was going to get out and go into conflict resolution in war zones. That's what I wanted to create a business in. And I started my application in 2008. It got delayed for about 8 years till 2016. Yeah, so every year for different reasons, they kept telling me next year, next year. So what ended up happening is I graduated in 2009. So for about 7, 8 years, I ended up doing a ton of short-term jobs. So, and my first one I completely lucked into by accident was, of course, I worked at Louis Government's office in DC. I was a paid intern, like a temporary staff assistant type of person, 5 months. I hated it. I left after that. I like the people I work with. I still keep in touch with a lot of them, and they are helping me in this process. But I didn't like the culture. I didn't think it was focused on serving the constituents. I just thought it was, about, hey, look at me, I'm fancy, I work in DC kind of thing. But yeah, so I worked there. Then I did a bunch of different stuff you can read on the website, but the most time was roughly 4 years. I went to work in the oil field, and I roughnecked there. I started out as a floor hand, so throwing tongs, pulling slips, worked up to motors, derricks, and then I ended up as a driller. And a lot of people don't know what that is. All a driller does is basically you operate the oil rig, which is about like a $15 million piece of equipment. And then you run the crew. So you let the guys know what needs to be done. You have a consultant on site that tells you what needs to happen to drill this oil well. And then the driller is the one that executes using the machinery available and the hands. So we ended up drilling multiple natural gas and oil wells that are pumping right now across Texas and New Mexico. And then I ended up going into the Marine Corps finally in 2016. Ended up being an artillery officer and stationed in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And then I was in charge of units varying from, the smallest was 36 Marines and the biggest was 108 or so. And I was the officer in charge of these units, and specifically designing and implementing day-to-day operations. And then I also got time to work with bigger units like battalion size, which is roughly 600 to 800 people, helping plan strategy for them. And then I got back home last year, and a lot of the military strategy that they teach us as officers is what was helpful in figuring out this plan that we keep talking about. I mean, we all want to get deployed because we do a lot of really crappy training, and then when you do it, especially me, when I was training outside of the Marine Corps for 8 years, and then we have 0 deployments, I was scheduled for 3 deployments, 2 of them combat, and they all got canceled at the last minute because we kept pulling troops out of everywhere across the world, which I guess is a good thing. Of course, world peace is always good, but I know me and the Marines, we hated it. So, and I realized eventually I was going to have to get into politics because I saw the disconnect. Like my buddies I roughnecked with and my buddies I grew up with here in East Texas, and then my friends from Rice, right, that are now in different, I have friends that have worked at the White House, both houses of Congress, different federal agencies, and been to, name the Ivy League school, law, Harvard Law, MIT MBA. I have buddies that have had those experiences, and these two groups of friends, the way they see the country and the direction the country is headed in, they completely diverge. And I knew that was going to be a problem in like 2015, but I thought it would be a problem like 40 years down the road. Like after we had kids and retired and all that kind of stuff, I didn't think it was going to manifest itself this quickly as we're seeing now. And so, so when I got back last year, I started doing a ton of research into why these things are happening and whether it really is as bad as, the media and politicians make it out to be. And it really is as bad. The stuff we're seeing is historically bad, and that's how you know it's time to get worried and time to actually do something about it. And so that's why I'm running for the US Congress and specifically the House, because if you look at all of our societal ills, if you look at the political atmosphere, whether it's at the dinner table, at the family dinner table, or in the national media, the root cause of all of this is the fact that the House of Representatives cannot pass legislation that solves middle-class problems. And when I say middle-class problems, I mean the price of healthcare, the lack of good public schools in certain communities, blue-collar jobs getting shipped overseas, a nation that creates consumers and not citizens, right? And because the House of Representatives cannot solve these middle-class problems, that those arguments, which have been happening for decades, unknowns to the public, it's been happening for a long time, they're now manifesting into culture war arguments, which is what we're seeing about everything. And that's why these arguments we hear now don't even make sense, right? So that's why I'm running for Congress, because I think there's a specific way that we can rebrand to where we can get Congress problem solving for the middle class a lot better. And that's what we're calling the plan. And like I said, I work for Louis and I like him as a person. And I think a lot of the comments he said were taken out of context by the mainstream media, for sure. The way that I would be is very simple. And I learned this in the Marine Corps as an officer, which is you can be a complete body slayer without having to yell about it. Okay? So so the way that I would carry out business is very simple. I mean, I believe in conservative values because that's how I was raised, and I see that you cannot have a prosperous country until you use faith as the foundation of that society, and you make family and community the central organizing principles of that society. Okay, that's what I believe. And so the way that I would do it is I would fight for conservative values, but not just in speech. I would do it through action. Okay, so I would do it through trying to negotiate with other Congress people, trying to find like win-win laws that would work for different groups, plus the conservative caucus. And I think that's the only way you push the conservative movement forward is we have to understand there will be no more bipartisanship, in this day and age. It's just not going to happen. So what needs to happen is the conservative football team, right, our team, we need to drive to the touchdown for middle-class problems. And so that's what I would do. I'm not about giving speeches. I don't care about sound bites. I want to get stuff done. And the only way you can get stuff done now is not through bipartisanship, because that's fantasy. It is you have to galvanize your team, the conservative party and movement, to see what laws we can actually accomplish and then figure out ways to organize people to do them. And that's what the plan is. Because, a football player is just like politicians. They have ego, they have pride, they have greed, they have laziness, right? So what do coaches do to make football players perform? That's exactly right, dude. And because the player knows if everyone in the entire stadium, right, the crowd, which is the voters, and the coaches, which is the motivated voters, and the media, if everyone knows, hey, this player is supposed to run 30 yards straight and then turn and cast the ball, and everyone else is supposed to block, right? If the entire the field knows it, then that player, or our politician in this case, knows, well, I better perform or else I'm going to get benched or I'm going to get fired. Right? They know I just need to perform this one play. After that, I can go back to being lazy. I can go back to being greedy for the special interest. I can go back to just saying a bunch of stuff. And I think that is the key to solving these gridlocks is we have to simplify what we're trying to do for each legislation so much that everyone in the country knows exactly what we're trying to do, including that average voter that does not have time to pay attention to politics.